Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show that takes a stack of sources, extracts the most important nuggets, and, well, helps you become instantly well-informed. Today, we're tackling something really fundamental. It's the indispensable intellectual scaffolding for any serious project. Doesn't matter if you're launching a new technology, writing a book, or just trying to get your head around a new skill. We're talking about the review of literature, or the LOIR. Our mission today is pretty simple, but it's also critical. We're going to unpack what our sources say about this whole process. We want to move way beyond this idea of just reading a lot and into, understanding it as a real act of intellectual synthesis. This is where the architecture of knowledge gets built.
It really is. And we need to set the stakes right away because the sources are so clear about how important this step is. They define the review of literature as, and this is a direct quote, the foundation upon which all future work will be built. It's literally the concrete you pour before the walls can go up.
Yeah.
And if you skip that step, if you don't survey that foundation, the warning is pretty stark. Your work just risks being shallow and naive. And maybe even worse, you end up duplicating work that someone else has already done better. This isn't just some chore you do first. It's the originality imperative.
Okay, that's a powerful idea. Let's unpack that, starting with the words themselves. Because a review and literature, they mean something very different in a research context, right?
Yeah.
If you're building a business plan, what even is the literature you're supposed to be reviewing?
That is the key distinction, yeah. When we normally hear literature, we think, fiction, poetry, that sort of thing. But here, in methodology, literature is specifically the collected knowledge of a particular field of investigation, any discipline. And that knowledge, it really breaks down into three parts. You have your theoretical studies, your practical studies, like case studies, and then all the formal research that's already been done. It's the entire intellectual history of your topic all in one place.
And the review part, that's the active work. It's not just passive reading, is it? The sources say review means to organize the knowledge. Why is that word organize so important?
Because the goal is to evolve an edifice of knowledge. To put it plainly, you're structuring everything that's already known so you can see exactly where the holes are. And you need that structure to build a logical case, to show everyone else why your new study or your new product is a real addition to the field and not just, shuffling the same old furniture around.
I love how the sources describe this. They say the task is both highly creative and tedious. That just feels like a complete contradiction. How can organizing old information be creative?
Because it's synthesis, not summary. That's the creative act.
Okay.
If you just summarize 3 different papers, all you have is 3 summaries. But synthesis is taking those 3, seeing where they agree, where they contradict, and maybe where they all miss a key variable. The creative part is weaving it all together into a new story, a new argument that justifies your own work. It's tedious because, yes, it's meticulous reading, but it's creative because you're actually building something unique.
That immediately makes me think of real-world professionalism. The sources have these great analogies. They mention good, bar, and skates, who say a researcher needs to know their sources just like a competent physician must keep abreast of the latest discoveries. Unquote. So what is it about that analogy, this kind of ethical need to keep abreast, that applies to someone, say, outside of a university, like a startup founder?
Oh, it's completely relevant. A doctor who doesn't read the latest trials might give you an outdated treatment. It's a failure of their professional duty. A startup founder who doesn't review the market literature, the failure reports, the patents, competitor analyses, they risk building something that either already exists or is doomed to fail for a known reason. The lore is, in a way, an ethical duty to the quality of your work.
Right.
And C.B. Good has another great metaphor for this. He says, the lore gives you the keys to the vast storehouse of published literature. That storehouse holds everything. The problems, the procedures, the hypotheses, the data for comparison. It unlocks all the tools you're going to need.
So we've established it's about synthesis, about organization. But let's talk about the timing. Why is it so urgent to do this first? Why not just collect some of your own data and then see where it fits?
Because it's one of the earliest steps in planning. If you do it later, you've probably already wasted time, money, effort, collecting data you didn't need or collecting it in a way the literature could have told you was flawed from the start. It's about efficiency. And that's where we have to come back to that warning from W.R. Borg. You have to respect that originality imperative. You just don't want to be 6 months into a project only to discover you've reinvented the square wheel.
I see that. But couldn't you argue that with Google Scholar and AI search tools, that this duplication problem isn't as scary as it used to be? Don't search engines solve that?
They solve the finding problem, sure, but not the synthesis problem. An AI can list every paper on a topic for you. But only a human investigator, through this rigorous review process, can connect those dots, see which methods are actually solid, and spot the subtle gaps in logic that make your project necessary. The machine finds the ingredients, you still have to be the chef.
That's a great way to put it. The human has to orchestrate it. Okay, so once you commit to this, the sources say there are two distinct phases. Can you walk us through those?
The first phase is basically investigation. It's the reading and collecting. You identify all the relevant material and you read it. This is the tedious part we talked about. But the second phase is where the value really comes through. It's the writing. You write this foundation of ideas into a specific section of your report. And that written review serves a dual purpose.
A dual purpose? How so?
Well, for you, the researcher, it's your own structured document. It proves to you that you've done the background work. But for your reader, an investor, a supervisor, your peers, it provides the summary they need to understand why your work matters. It gets them on the same page as you intellectually.
Right, it gives it the context. That reminds me of what J.W. Best says, that all human progress is possible because we can build upon the accumulated and recorded knowledge of the past. The lore is literally the mechanism that lets us do that. It's how we stand on the shoulders of giants. Okay, so let's get into the brass tacks. If this is the foundation, what's the actual return on that investment? What are the specific practical objectives you get from all this work?
There are 5 key objectives in our sources, and they really are the payoff for all that tedious effort. The first is that it's a source of ideas.
A source of ideas.
Absolutely. You're reviewing what other people have done, so you find theories, explanations, even hypotheses that are ready to go. They can be incredibly useful for framing your own unique problem. You don't always have to start from scratch.
And the second one, you mentioned it before, is efficiency. It's about avoiding replication.
Exactly. It's the ultimate feasibility check. The literature shows you if the problem has already been adequately solved, so you don't have to waste your time and resources investigating it again.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the third?
The third is all about methodology clues. This is where the rubber really meets the road. The lore tells you which methods, which procedures, which data sources are appropriate for solving your problem. It stops you from using outdated or just plain wrong tools for the job.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Let's say you see that 3 previous studies on your topic all failed, and they all used a survey, but 2 other studies succeeded, and they both used ethnographic case studies. The literature is pointing you very directly towards a more successful procedure.
And the fourth objective, that's about interpretation, which I think people can forget. It gives you a benchmark, something to compare your results to.
Exactly. The conclusions from other studies give you a comparative framework. So when you get your own findings, you're not just looking at them in a vacuum. You can say, hey, our results line up with study A here, but they totally contradict study B over there, which means we need to look closer at Z. It gives your findings actual meaning within the field.
Now, to do this properly, you can't just type a few things into Google. The sources list this whole catalog of information avenues a researcher has to explore. It really shows the breadth that's required. Let's run through a few.
Of course. You start with the obvious. Books and textbooks. They give you the broad, established context, the big picture.
But then you have to get to the cutting edge, which is periodicals and abstracts. Why are those so much more critical than a textbook?
Because a textbook, by its nature, is already a little dated. Periodicals, we mean peer-reviewed journals, have the very latest discoveries. And abstracts are your triage tool. They let you quickly scan hundreds of studies to see what's relevant before you commit to reading the whole thing.
Then you have the more specialized tools. Encyclopedias for a quick overview, handbooks and guides for the practical how-to steps, and special dictionaries to make sure you're using all the terms correctly.
Right, and here's where a lot of people stop. But the really serious researcher digs deeper into unpublished work. We're talking about dissertations and theses.
Why are those so important?
Because they contain all the details that get cut from a polished journal article. The full methodology, the raw data, the dead ends, they show you exactly how the research was actually done, warts and all.
And then finally, yes, the internet is on the list, but it's a delivery system, not a source in itself. It's the pipe you use to get to those legitimate journals and archives.
Okay, so that catalog shows us the tools, and the objectives tell us what we get out of it. But the sources give us one more piece, the 4 core functions of the lore. This is about the role it plays in shaping the research itself.
Exactly. If the objectives are the what, the functions are the how the review actively steers your project.
So the first function is establishing the conceptual frame of reference. That sounds very academic. What does it mean in practice? It means you're defining your boundaries. You're deciding which theories you're going to use, which concepts matter, and just as important, which variables you're going to ignore. It's the theoretical sandbox you're choosing to play in. It gives you focus. Then the second function is to create an understanding of the status of research. Are you the very first person to ask this question? Or is this a really mature field with thousands of studies? Knowing that tells you how ambitious or how cautious you need to be.
And the third one is purely practical, providing clues to the research approach, method, instrumentation, and data analysis. This is the operational guidance. It's about choosing the right tools.
Precisely. And the fourth function is maybe the most strategic of all. It's determining the probability of success and the significance of your findings. By looking at what's been tried, what's worked, and what's failed, you can make a really good guess about whether your project is even feasible.
So if I'm hearing that right, that fourth function is basically doing a full-on internal feasibility study before you even start. It tells you if the project is worth the time and money.
That's it, exactly. And when it performs all four of those functions, the review of literature elevates your entire project. It turns a simple curiosity into a structured, formal plan. It connects your work to the entire academic and professional conversation that's already happening.
So, after all this, what does it all mean? I think our deep dive today shows that the review of literature isn't just some box you check before you get to the real work. It is the real work. It's the core act of synthesis you need to do to make sure your work is original, deep, and efficient. It's the conversation you have with everyone who came before you.
And that conversation keeps you up to date. It helps you find the gaps, the unanswered questions, and a lot of the time, that's where you find the source of your research problem in the first place. Better knowledge leads to better questions.
Our sources leave us with this one final thought that connects all this rigor to personal development. It says the literature in your field is a good avenue towards making oneself. We spent this whole time talking about how a good review shapes the research, making it robust and original. But think about this. If that constant critical engagement with all of this accumulated knowledge shapes the research itself, how does that same process, that dedication to synthesis, shape you as a professional, as a thinker? What knowledge foundation are you building upon right now to make yourself? We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.